Today we're just off Highway 70 here in Goldsboro at Casey's Garden Center, and we're here with Jessica Strickland, the horticulture agent for the County of Wayne. How you doing?
Doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic.
Yes.
Great weather. It is growing season.
It's summertime.
It's summertime. Officially, in fact.
It is. Yeah.
Came in last week. So here we are amongst the Leland cypress and enjoying the weather on this beautiful morning. And here you might be able to even hear the sprinklers going in the background.
Right,
But Casey's Daniel's got a great place out here, so we often will use this location for examples.
That's right.
For example, what are we talking about?
Our main topic we're going to talk about today is about mulch.
Mulch.
Yes, and mulch is something that a lot of people apply to their yard, usually annually, depending on what type of mulch you have. But there's a lot of benefits to mulch, and it's better than having bare ground as far as it controls weeds. It also will help conserve some soil moisture. But a lot of people do it for the weed control, but it does make your landscape beds look a lot better.
It makes a big
difference.
So that's some of the advantages then.
It is.
It helps hold moisture, which in dry weather especially, that's
it helps,
a big
yes,
plus. Yeah.
it does.
And it controls weeds. So how much is enough, or how much would be too much?
Usually for mulch we say about 3 to 4 inch layer is what you're looking at. You don't want it too thick, because if you have it too thick, it is going to possibly prevent water from getting down to the soil, so you don't want to prevent the water from getting to the roots, the plant roots. Another thing that often happens that we try to tell people to avoid is that they will pile the mulch up against the plants. A lot of times you see that piled up against tree trunks, called volcano mulching.
Yes.
And instead you want to have about that 3 or 4 inch mulch layer, but around your trees you want to pull it away from the trunk and leave about 1 inch space around the trunk.
You know, with some hardwoods, I've actually seen roots growing above ground into the mulch.
That's what tends to happen. You pile the mulch up on the trunk of the tree, and it starts to produce roots there, and then the roots are growing in the mulch, not in the soil. And what happens is that mulch dries out quicker, then those roots dry out, and then your tree starts suffering. And it also can hold moisture there and can cause rot and can encourage pest and insect problems at the base there. And once you lose the base of that tree, you're not going to be able to save the tree. So you want to make sure you don't pile that mulch up against the trunk of the tree.
So no volcano mulching, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, 3 to 4 inches thick. And we'll talk about the composition of mulch here in just a moment. But 3 or 4 inches thick, and pull it away from the trunk of the tree or the shrub.
That's right, yep. Okay. And another question we get a lot of about mulch is when to apply it. Really any time of the year. There's not a certain time that you have to apply it that's better. Some people lean towards winter time being a better time because a lot of the leaves are on the off the trees and the shrubs. Also you have less weeds during that time, so it's just easier to maneuver around those plants during the winter time. So a lot of people prefer winter, but you can really apply mulch any time of the year.
Just about any time of year, it doesn't matter.
Right. Yes.
Okay, 3 or 4 inches, pull it away from the trunk, 3 or 4 inches.
Yes.
And the shrub or the tree. Is there anything else? Should you mulch your vegetable garden, for instance?
You can. Anywhere you want to try to control weeds or conserve some soil moisture, you can do that. So a lot of people will, if they have their vegetable gardens in rows, they will mulch between the rows, and that helps reduce some of the weeds that you have to control and pull up. It's not going to stop every weed from coming up. There's going to be some tough weeds that will find their way through the mulch.
Yes, they do.
But it really does cut out a lot of the weed problems that you would have with bare ground.
Okay, so for anybody who doesn't really enjoy pulling weeds,
yeah, you want to start with mulch.
Start with mulch.
Yes.
That'll be a big plus, and it'll help cut down that weed pulling. Right?
It will, yes.
All right, now, so there's all kinds of different kinds of mulches.
There is, and so that's a big question everybody has, is what kind of mulch is the best?
Yeah.
And there's really not a best mulch out there. It's going to be personal preference. So there's a lot of advantages and disadvantages to different types of mulch.
Let's take a look at one of these mulches.
Yes.
All right, tell me about this. What are we looking at here?
This one, these we would call inorganic mulches.
Inorganic.
Yeah, they're not going to break down. These usually are pebbles and rocks that we look at. The advantages of them is they're not going to break down, so you don't have to reapply them as often as you would some of the other organic mulches we'll talk about in a little bit. Okay. The downfall is they are rocks and pebbles, so if they make their way into the grass and you mow, they can break a window, or they tend to, eventually the soil kind of piles up around them, or leaves pile up on top and doesn't quite break down and make their way to the soil. But usually the biggest disadvantage is they kind of spread out a little bit, and then eventually get into lawns and such where you don't want them.
Yeah.
But rocks do have their place in a lot of landscapes where if you want more of a desert look or more of a rock garden, they work really well for that.
Should we be concerned about the weight of the rock?
The weight's going to be one thing too. That this one's really small, but we have another one we'll show in a minute that's larger pebbles or rocks,
yeah.
And so the weight's there too. The other thing is, if you change your mind, it takes a lot more work to clean this mulch up because it's not going to break down. You're going to sit there and pick up all the rocks if you change your mind later.
So you don't want it to pack down the soil.
Yes.
And if you change your mind, you got a lot of work ahead of you.
You do, yeah. And I think that, like I said, the biggest complaint is when it makes its way in the grass and then the lawnmower catches it, is where you see a lot of complaints about. But I do see, and a lot of times you see in the small little beds around like sidewalks and such, that it works well, and it adds a different effect as far as a different texture to the landscape.
Okay, that's the small pebbles. Is there a name for this, or is it
no, it's just a smaller pebble that look at.
All right, very
And then
good.
the other one we got here is.
Oh, we got rocks. I got rocks in my head here. Okay, thank you.
And this one we're looking at is just larger pebbles.
Okay.
And larger rocks.
Yeah, that's a pretty good size there.
And they're all different sizes and colors, so they are attractive and can be attractive and in the right situation.
I can see how they would be.
Yes,
but
again,
they
would be heavy.
They're heavy,
Yes.
and the weight, they will weigh down your, impact the soil.
It will.
Pack it down to some degree.
Yes.
And one of my pets has shown up here. Marvin Mosquito is with us this morning, so welcome, Marvin.
Yep.
But those rocks are very heavy.
They are.
And is there a choice as to which one, or is it just personal?
It's really
choice?
personal preference, and you can find even more than what we have here. This is just a couple examples, but there's a lot of different rocks. You got kind of the volcano, the lava rocks that are more of a red brick color.
Yeah.
And
those are nice.
Yeah, so there's different ones to pick from.
And I believe those are lighter in weight as well.
Yeah,
they won't pack down the
those
soil.
would be lighter than some of the other rocks.
The lava rock, okay. All right, now let's move on to a more natural.
Yeah, so these we refer to as a group just organic mulches. These are going to be the ones, they come from some kind of plant material, so they're going to break down over time. The good part is it does add a little bit of nutrients and organic matter to your soil over time. Not enough to replace fertilizer completely, but it does add a little bit to the soil as it breaks down. Okay. The disadvantage, though, is because it does break down, is you have to reapply it, usually yearly, is what most people do. So it is going to break down where you have to reapply it yearly. And this one we have here is just one example. Usually people refer to as like pine nuggets or bark nuggets.
Like bark.
Yeah, so it's bigger pieces. This one, they're lighter and they're larger pieces. This one, probably the biggest complaint you get with this is that because they are so light, is that when we have heavy rains and if you have some puddling in your landscape beds, these will float a little bit and they kind of pile up on one side of the bed and you have to spread them back out. Right. And but that's your bark nuggets.
Okay, so it's pine, usually most of that looks like pine bark.
Yes.
Okay, and another here is a little more colorful.
Yeah, and this one is a very common one. It's just shredded bark, and a lot of times it's shredded pine bark. And you can, a lot of different colors. This one's got more of a brick red color to it, but there's some that's more of a chocolate color. There's more, it looks natural. This is probably one of the more popular mulches that people pick from. Does great. It doesn't float as bad as the nuggets do. It's got a little more weight to it and packs down pretty well where it holds its place.
But
well, there's not too many disadvantages to it except just the color, the preference as far as what kind of color you'd like that would stand out in your landscape.
Usually these are dyed.
It can be dyed.
And the dye will fade.
Yeah, and it can, that's right.
It loses its color.
It can fade and lose its color over time, that's right. So you wouldn't want to, again, go back to reapplying to get that color effect there.
But it's a good idea to reapply anyway.
Yes, that's right, yes.
All right, now the old standby. And we're looking at pine straw.
Yeah, this is one that's, again, it's probably pine straw and the shredded bark is probably the two most common ones used. And pine straw, it's in abundance here with our pine trees, so it's used a lot for mulch. And probably if you move to this area, you're probably not as familiar with it because it's just, we're using the pine trees that we have here and making use of these needles.
We are, after all, the pine tree state here in North Carolina. That's one of our state
that's right.
nicknames.
And so we got plenty of them. So we got plenty of pine straw, and it works great as a mulch. It's lighter, doesn't pack down as tightly as maybe the shredded bark does. Probably the one thing here is like once you apply it, the wind might kind of cause a tumbleweed of straw to blow by, and you have to spread it back out. So sometimes the wind can catch it because it is so light. But it does, again, breaks down pretty quickly, so every year you'd have to reapply.
Yeah, the thing about pine straw, like you say, it does break down quickly.
Yes.
The color fades and it packs down a little bit. And it's a good idea to replace it because you want it to look fresh.
That's right, yes. And as these organic ones break down, then you're putting a little bit of nutrients, a little bit of organic matter back into the soil. That's right. So it helps improve the soil over time.
It does help the soil.
Yes.
All right, and it's relatively inexpensive.
It is, yeah. It's pretty expensive and pretty readily available in our area.
All right, so we need to mulch, and so you don't have to replace the rocks, of course.
You don't have to replace the rocks, and these are just a few examples. Like with the inorganic ones, I've even seen before, like playgrounds, they use recycled shredded tires, and they'll dye those and put them in playgrounds because they're soft. They got a little bit of a cushion for kids that are playing. There's a lot of different mulches to pick from, so it depends on your situation, and just really comes down to personal preference as to what you prefer.
Very good. All right. Now we're talking with Jessica Strickland of the Cooperative Extension Service. And Jessica, what am I holding here?
Well, for covering a plant for this month, was looking at this one. This one is called common name moss rose, or scientific name of it is Portulaca grandiflora. And sometimes you hear the name purslane, which sometimes is a close relative to a weed you see out in the garden and such. But this one has been, there's been a lot of breeding and development done to create some with some beautiful flowers that work great in the garden or your landscape with this plant.
This is so easy to grow.
It is. It's very easy to grow. The great thing about it is with our sandy, dry soils, hot summers, this does great in those situations. So if you've got an area you can't get anything to grow, the sand or the soil's very sandy, as far as a lot of heat, a lot of full sun, very little water, this one can handle that type of situation well.
And my experience has been when one of these petals or leaves or branches falls off, and it's not a hardwood, but it's soft, it almost immediately takes root.
It does.
It's so easy to grow.
It's a succulent with this fleshy growth, and it does. It can break off and re-root very easily and fill in an area, but also it can reseed itself, so you'll get more next year. So if you've got an area, like I said, having trouble growing anything as far as the soil or the heat and dry weather, this one works really well. It's low growing, doesn't get very tall, but it spreads out. You can see this is a hanging basket. It works in containers, so you can do a lot with it.
Can you use it as a ground cover?
You can. You can use it.
Spread like crazy.
That's right. You can use it as a ground cover. There are different colors of flowers. This one's yellow, but there's reds and oranges and whites that you could also pick from. And there's been others bred that have maybe different kind of flower that have maybe more petals on them, but it kind of has a cactus desert look to it. Works great in rock gardens to grow around rocks or on some kind of slight slope that you need something to fill in. It'd work well there too.
I've seen a Portulaca multicolor. It's got reds and pinks and purples and no blues, but a little bit of everything in it. Lots of color. And then there's the solid color like this one and other colors as well. Yeah,
so it's a great plant for those hard,
You called it a moss rose.
Yes, a moss rose, or Portulaca is the scientific name, and but it's just one of those that really does well with heat and dry weather. So if you've got those spots that you're struggling with, this might be a possibility.
And these are available all over Wayne County.
They are, yeah. There's a lot. You can usually find them very easily. So.
Okay, very good. Now, Jessica, we want to talk about a problem that appears, and in fact, it's quite common here in Wayne County. What are we talking about?
Talking about blossom end rot on tomatoes.
Dreaded blossom end rot.
Dreaded blossom end rot.
Right. All right. What is blossom end rot?
Blossom end rot is, a lot of people think it's a disease, that their tomatoes are rotting, or this can even happen on peppers or melons. It can happen on several different vegetables. But they think that the blossom end, which is the very end of the underside of the fruit or the vegetable is starting to rot, so they think they have a disease, but it's actually a calcium deficiency. And a lot of times calcium needs water for it to move up the plant, so it's in the soil, but sometimes with our hot dry summers and the fluctuation of we get heavy rainfalls, then we get really dry weather, that back and forth with the weather can really cause blossom end rot, because that calcium is just not making its way up the plant to the vegetable.
So the calcium is naturally occurring in the soil.
Yes.
Should we add calcium?
Well, there are some ways that you can fix this. You don't have to spray a fungicide or any pesticides with it, because it is a nutrient deficiency, and it's calcium's a problem. And
so
have an example. This is just one brand. It's sold under a lot of different brands. And sometimes you'll see rot stop or something along those lines, but you'll see that it stops blossom end rot. And so these are calcium sprays, so you can spray them on the foliage. You do want to do it in the morning. You don't want to do it in the heat of the day, so that's a little tricky with summertime when it's 80, 85 degrees or more. You want to make sure you put this early in the morning.
You don't spray it on the fruit, do you?
Yeah, you probably can get on fruit, but mostly you're aiming for the leaves. So the plant will absorb that, and then it'll go on into the fruit.
Oh, okay. So. But now this is on tomatoes particularly. It shows up quickly.
Yeah, tomatoes, and usually that's pretty normal for tomatoes. The first crop of tomatoes you get, the first few you're getting, it's normal because the plant's just now switching over to producing fruit, and that calcium hasn't made its way up there. So sometimes you'll find it on a few, and then you don't see the problem anymore.
So when the tomato's growing off the stem, the stem grows, it has the tomato there, but it's on the underside.
Yes.
The side away from the stem of the tomato.
Yes.
You'll find it looks like it's rotting.
It does. It looks like it's rotting, and it gets to where it has kind of a leathery appearance to it, and kind of tough. And that's, like I said, usually the first few tomatoes you'll find it on there, and sometimes it goes away on its own. You don't have to do anything. If it's a continuous problem, a quick fix is using this calcium spray. If it's a long-term problem that seems to be occurring every year all the time in your garden, there's a couple other things to look at. One is to get a soil test, because you want to check the soil pH to make sure the pH level is at the correct range. So then the calcium is more available if that pH is correct. So if it's been a long-term problem year after year, make sure to get a soil test, and that'll help you for next year. It won't help right now, but for next year it would help. And then the other thing is to make sure you have consistent watering. Like I mentioned earlier, that fluctuation in watering where it goes from really wet to dry causes the calcium not to make its way through the plant. So instead what you'd want to do is make sure you have consistent watering. During the dry spells, make sure you water the tomatoes or any of the other vegetables that you see the problem.
Aside from tomatoes, what are some of the other things?
Peppers it can happen on. Usually see tomatoes and peppers are the most common ones, but it can occur on melons, occasionally cucumbers. So, yes.
All right, very good. And this can be found at any of the gardening stores?
It can. A lot of times you see it kind of with some of the fungicides and such. It's in the section with the pesticides, but it's just a calcium spray, so it's not technically a pesticide. So yes.
All right. So stop rot or stop blossom end rot. This is called the yield booster.
Yeah, and it's they're advertising yield booster. That's boosting your yield because you'll get rid of blossom end rot. But a lot of times look for that says blossom end rot or rot stop something. But several different brands sell this. You can either, like this one's a spray. Or you might find it in a container more like this, that you would mix it with water and put it on the plants.
This is concentrated.
Yes, so you find different ways.
If you catch blossom end rot soon enough, can you whack it off the end of the veggie and then still eat the veggie?
It might be able to, that you can save the top part of
it. Anything.
That's right, and some people do that. They save the top part if they can and get rid of that bottom part. So, yes.
Very good. Blossom end rot, the dreaded blossom end rot. Jessica Strickland, thank you very much. Jessica is a horticulture agent for the County of Wayne, and if they want to know more about this, do you have a pamphlet on?
We do have some information on mulches and
information sheet on
that we can share, and they can contact our office. We're on the corner of George and Chestnut Street in Goldsboro, and our phone number is 919-731-1520.
All right, Jessica Strickland, the horticulture agent, the Cooperative Extension Service here in Wayne County.
Thank you.